What's up, guys? So free reset is back, and I'm gonna give you guys my kind of process in how I level defenders, and I'm gonna show you all these guys' builds. But the process is the most important part. I'll show you how I'm leveling defenders, so whatever defender you have, you can kind of get an idea of how I would build them. So I'm gonna look at the stats that are important, and then also which skills I would use, and then which play styles like defensive, fullback, destroyer, etc., etc. I think work best in tandem. So before we get into defenders, we have to look at our goalkeeper. To be honest, with Petr Cech, he's the best keeper in the game. There's not too much about this build other than I'm trying to get 90 on every goalkeeping stat. But an example of a goalkeeper where I do have to think about the build is Dida. Now, if you look at Dida, you can see only 3 of the stats are above 90 and 2 of them are below, and that is for a good reason. I think awareness, reflexes, and reach are the most important stats on a goalkeeper. Catching and parrying are obviously good and useful, but you're relying on chance and Konami's calculations on, is this shot going to get caught or is it going to get parried? Now, if it doesn't get caught, it gets parried, and the reason parrying has a stat is because it determines how effective the parry is. Does it parry it to an attacker, or out wide for a corner, or out wide into empty space for your defenders to pick up? So they are useful stats, but I just don't want to rely on chance, so I kind of prioritize the other stats first. Do I notice anything about offensive and defensive goalkeepers? I don't think it matters, other than don't use Neuer, because Neuer can be out of position quite often. Another stat that's interesting is jumping. One of the goalkeeping stats you level up actually increases jumping. It's goalkeeping 1. So jumping does matter for goalkeepers. Also, some builds you'll put aerial strength in too. Now, Dida has 85 jumping, but Cech has 78. They perform the same in the game though, right? Because if we look at the goalkeeper reach, the difference in jumping is pretty much determined by the difference in reach. Dida might actually be a little bit better in those kind of high shots or coming crosses, but overall Cech's better just because the other stats are better for him too in reflexes and awareness. For skills and goalkeepers, obviously you're just looking for low punt, like the goalkeeping skills. Other than that, I've tried to get like low off the pass on Cech. I have it. I don't think it helps majorly. And then I want one touch pass and true pass. But unfortunately, I'm not wasting skills on them. Now, if we look at the centre backs, we'll start with the centre backs. You can see I actually play Vieira centre back. I think he's the best centre back in the game. But the reason is I think it's just player ID. Pez Pepe did a video on player ID and interceptions. He has the longest legs in the game relative to his height, or something along those lines, and that's why he is a beast at intercepting. So if we look at his build, though, I also have quite high passing, and it's because I like to pass out of back with my centre backs, and same with the dribbling too. So I like to hold on to the ball with them and build up from the back. If we look at Romero, you can see Romero's a destroyer and Vieira's a destroyer. I actually wouldn't play both of them in centre back, and the reason for that is because 2 destroyers in centre back, it can just spell issues, because the way destroyer works is they want to step up and intercept, or if the ball is played into a striker, say, and the strikers come deep a little bit where Saliba is, the destroyers will step up. But if you have 2 of them, they're both going to step up, and one of them's going to be out of position, and it's a problem. So if I'm playing a 4-back, I have a build-up and a destroyer. Now, you can play a defensive fullback instead of the build-up. It's inactive playstyle, but it seems to be fine. Essentially, you're just looking, don't have 2 destroyers in a 2-back. On my main team, I actually have 2 destroyers in my back line, but I'm playing a 3-back, so it's not as big of an issue. And before I move on from the 3-back, actually, if you play a 3-back, just make sure your middle centre-back is tall and dominant in the air. Other than that, you're fine. The outside ones don't have to be as dominant in the air. But if we go back into the defender squad, if we look at Romero, the way I level defenders is get all defensive stats to 90. Caveat to that though, engagement doesn't need to be as high. Engagement determines how likely your player is to track back when they're low on stamina or get back into position. Defensively, centre back shouldn't be out of position. It shouldn't be an issue. I still try to get it to 90 just because it's a round number threshold, but it's not. That particular one isn't as important. Now, there is another caveat though. You can see Vieira doesn't have 88 awareness. This is because I just wanted to make him more well-rounded, and I can have the ability to put him into DMF or centre midfield if I need to. But the thing is, with this DMF build, he's the best centre back in the game still for me. So this is the build I would go with for Vieira. Now, when I'm leveling my destroyers don't actually need to be good in the air. Like I said, they're coming and stepping up. They're playing the ball into feet. sorry, when the opponent plays the ball and defeat, the destroyer's job is to go up and then tackle and put pressure on the defender. Whereas the build-up's job is if a long ball comes in, they're marking the striker and they need to be good in the air. I did level up Romero's jumping just because the stats were there. And I couldn't get his passing and dribbling up to a decent level. So if I could get that to 70, either these to 70s for cheap, I would have done it and not leveled the jumping, but because it's not there, it's not worth it. I'm going to play into the strength of the card. So what I'll do is go 90 on defending, then I get the points into lower body until we get 80 speed. Then I'll try get the acceleration up a little bit as well. You don't want the gap to be too large. I think I was happy with getting acceleration to 70. And then I put the points into aerial strength. And to be honest, if he had lower physical contact, I would have just went to 85 jump and then put the rest of the points into dexterity. But because we can get the 85 physical contact for the threshold on the +3 with Xabi Alonso or any manager with 88 proficiency, I went for that. Now, Saliba actually has, if I was playing this backline, like Saliba is my guy who's dominant in the air. But Saliba has much less jumping. The reason is because he has a good bit more height, and jumping and height are working kind of together, in the sense that if your jumping is really high but your height is low, you'll be good in the air, and then if your height is high but your jumping is low, it won't be too big of an issue. Like Van Boyton has decent jumping, but it's not as like it doesn't 85 jumping doesn't explain how good this guy is in the air. And same with actually Vieira. If we find Vieira again, he is honestly the best in the air for me defensively, and he only has 75 jumping, but he's got 192 centimeters. Now I did put aerial superiority on him, and if you're playing a centre back, the skills you need in centre backs are so Romero. You need interception, acrobatic clearance, blocker, and aerial superiority, and hopefully fighting spirit as well. That's the kind of like the skills you need by baseline. Like other than that, you can kind of start going into like let's look at Vieira. He has the pass skills. I put gamesmanship on him because I like to dribble with my centre backs. Sometimes I get fouled. True passing, yes, they're kind of the luxury skills. But if in terms of baseline, you need what was a blocker, aerial, acrobatic clearance, and interception. Now, if we move on to these two centre backs here, these are my kind of ball playing centre backs. And by the way, guys, we got Beckenbauer for free, and I don't see him very often in my opponent's teams, like the free to play teams. This Beckenbauer is amazing. Let's compare it to the Epic Rijkaard. Basically the same dribbling, way better passing. Finishing is kind of irrelevant, I guess. Actually, the offensive awareness is lower on Beckenbauer, but it's probably a better thing. You probably don't want them moving up too much. Heading's better on Rijkaard, but I don't think heading is important on defenders because heading is more for attacking headers, like shooting on goal. Your defenders just need to win the header. Where how accurate that header is doesn't matter because you should be pressing clearance anyway. You're more likely to win a header defensively if you press clearance compared to pressing pass. Speed basically the same, but the acceleration is higher, and I do think I noticed that. Now, acceleration isn't majorly important on defenders. I might come back to that later more in depth, but speed is more important because you're trying to make up this speed over longer distances. But yeah, you can see I have him. He's my ball playing centre back. You've seen in the main team I have him on the right side, behind the CMF in my main tactic, just because I want that centre back to have space to move up with the ball and then ping a pass if needed. And he actually has 90 jumping as well, and I put aerial superiority on him because, like I said, if you're playing a centre back, you need acrobatic clearance, interception, blocker, and aerial superiority. And he has those, so he's good for me. Now we'll go on to fullbacks here. We'll find a attacking fullback and a defensive fullback. So Kosker, defensive fullback. I also play him in a 3-back on the wide centre back. I actually think he's better there. But if I did play him fullback, I'd play him left back. And you can see here I got good lofted pass on him, and that's very common for all of my fullbacks. You can see Ben White has good lofted pass. Tomiyasu doesn't have actually the greatest lofted pass stats, but he does have the skills. He has weighted pass and low lofted pass. And you can see here I'm putting acrobatic clearance on him just to make him better at centre back. Lamb, another fullback, great lofted pass. Who else have I got? I've got Trent. Is he in this team? I don't think he is. Koundé could play there. He's also another player that doesn't have the greatest actual stats themselves. I mean, 70 is fine though, like for a fullback. But he's got good player ID. I don't know. In real life, you would expect him to be a good passer. I think it's just player ID for him, to be honest. If you don't know what player ID is, I think it's outside the scope of this video, but it's basically why Hullet, with kind of, where's Hullet? It explains why Hullet with kind of mid stats, you know, mid dribbling, mid finishing, mid defensive, mid aerials is the best player in the game. I might do a dedicated video on that. But Pez Pepe, actually, that video I was talking about earlier with Vieira, that's part of explaining why Vieira is so good. So for your fullbacks, the skills you need on fullbacks, I actually don't think there's many necessary. I would like acrobatic clearance, interception you would want, acrobatic clearance, and then you're just looking for the passing stats really. Like our skills rather, I've got one touch, true pass, and pinpoint and aerial on Costa Curta. Now the thing about Costa Curta is the pinpoint crossing isn't important if you're playing him as a traditional fullback. He's not going to get in crossing areas too much because he's a defensive fullback. The pinpoint crossing is for a low driven pass up to the striker. So L1 and double tap circle or whatever your cross button is. You can play a low cross into the striker, and that's very effective. You can see Lam. It's also kind of similar him. Now I'm playing him left mid more than left back, but you can see when I'm playing him left back, I did put aerial and acrobatic clearance on him. So I think the reason you want both of these is because very often your opponent will play a diagonal long pass up to his winger, and your fullback will be a little bit out of position, like not fully marking the winger. And when the ball is being played, he's going to have to make up that space. And then when you press clearance, you're going to want to have aerial for the header, or if it's too far away from do a header, acrobatic clearance, so you can do a bicycle kick clearance. Yeah, so the skills on him are more for left mid and centre mid. That's why I put track back on him, and when I do my video on midfielders, I'll explain how important track back is, why it's probably the best skill in the game. A skill I haven't talked about yet, I don't think, is fighting spirit. Fighting spirit, just a lot of defenders have it, and I think it's also linked to what I was talking about with defensive engagement earlier. So fighting spirit helps you when your stamina is low. If your defensive engagement is low on a centre back, do I have one here that's low? I don't think I do. But remember when I said earlier, you don't have to get defensive engagement to 90. He's gonna got it actually, and I don't think he has fighting spirit. Oh, he does have fighting spirit, but yeah, the fighting spirit will help him when his stamina is low and his defensive engagement is kind of low. It'll help him be more likely to want to get back into position. But your centre back shouldn't be out of position anyway, so it's not a major concern. For the rest of the team, I think we've covered everything there pretty much. Here's my Ben White build. I had a different build before. The problem with him is, and it's similar to Tomiyasu, he actually does start with quite decent dribbling stats, but because he's too tall, and I think his balance, yeah, his balance is too low. Now Tomiyasu's balance is actually quite decent, and he would be a better dribbler. Ben White's balance is too low, so even though on the build before I had like maybe 4 or 5 extra dribbling points, it wasn't effective. I've changed it now, and I've made it to be a kind of outside centre back in a 3-back kind of build. It is a shame though, you're not going to be able to get the edge crossing to play as big of a part, but I do think overall it's best in terms of, you know, effectiveness. But it is a shame you can't get the skill on him. Anything else I want to talk about? Okay, yeah, Rumi. So Rumi's obviously not a defender, but I do use him for a defensive reason. If we look at his skills, he does have track back, and he actually has fighting spirit. Now I put super sub on him and aerial superiority, so this is really important. Basically the track back, the super sub, and the aerial are really important. When you're trying to hold on to a lead, you want as striker, you can bring off the bench to still give yourself a goal threat, but also help out in defense. And Rumi's good at that because of his track back. His super sub obviously would just give him a boost because you're bringing him off the bench for a specific reason. And then aerial superiority is good because when you're defending, you want to be able to, you know, your opponent's pushed up very high and he can keep you pinned in if you try to build up out of the back. So you want to be able to hit a long ball up to Rumi or someone with aerial superiority. If we look at my bench, you can see similar concept. I'll play Martinelli. He has super sub and track back. I'll bring him off the bench and play him left mid so he can track back and help defend but also go forward. But another player is Griezmann. Now Griezmann actually has high aggression and defensive engagement. I love aggression on my attackers. It helps them kind of pickpocket the defenders and win the ball high up the pitch. And he also has defensive engagement, and he should have track back. No, he doesn't have track back. Okay, so I put aerial superiority on him to help him with the out ball thing. It helped a little bit. Looking back, I probably would have rather to put track back on him instead of long range curler because I feel like knock-on finesses aren't as effective as they used to be. But yeah, that kind of covers everything. I don't think there's anything I'm missing really. So I talked about the play styles. Oh, another thing actually. A lot of top players will do this in their defense where they'll have one fullback and then one centre back. I don't recommend doing that. I recommend doing what they're thinking of doing, but not that implementation. I would just instead put defensive instruction on, because the reason is it'll effectively do the same thing when you have the ball, but when you don't have the ball, when you have defensive instruction on, your fullback will kind of be here and looking for the ball if you go backwards and pass. Whereas if you have him as a centre back, whatever winger's there, instead of standing in front of the winger ready for the pass, he'll stand behind them and won't be an option. Now you might be thinking, okay, but I actually want them behind my winger, in case I lose the ball and get counter attacked. I mean, you can, if you want to be that more risk averse, fair enough. I find though that when they're in front, you lose the ball, they'll get back in position very quickly. The reason the meta players do it is probably because they don't play proper football and they don't pass it backwards. They just ping pong all the way up the pitch, so they don't need the fullback. But if you're trying to play a bit more structured to your team, definitely I'd put defensive fullback on one of them. So I'd put defensive back on White if I was using two attacking fullbacks. He should be a defensive fullback though, based on what I was talking about dribbling. Let's say I was playing Costa Curta or Tomiyasu, I wouldn't put the instruction on them. I would just leave him as a defensive fullback and leave Lamb without an instruction, and that gives you 2 instructions for the rest of your team. But yeah, that talks about everything in terms of defenders. If I've missed anything, ask any questions below. I'll try to get back to you. So next video we're going to talk about midfielders, and then after that we're going to talk about attackers. So yeah, subscribe and stay tuned for that. Peace.